I experienced the most alarming symptom I've ever had and the most sudden onset. It almost sent me into a panic. It was very, very strange. When their results came back, I was really, really surprised. Hi, I'm Ree from mummyof4.com. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am answering all of your questions that you have been sending in about my personal experience with having and recovering from what I guess is considered mild coronavirus or COVID-19. I've had so many questions from you guys and so many well wishes, so thank you so much for those. I will try and answer as many as I possibly can. I would ask you to remember that I am not a doctor. I am not a health professional in any way an expert. I have just had coronavirus and I'm just sharing what happened to me personally. So obviously it is very different for everybody. Everyone has a very different experience with this illness, and some people have it a lot more severe than I had it, and I would probably consider myself very lucky to have the milder version, but just because it was considered mild, well, I shall go into the details of it, and if you saw my Instagram stories, you will know that I was really quite poorly. Anyway, so not a doctor. If you have any symptoms or any issues, please consult your own doctor. And then obviously for all the latest guidance on what you should be doing about isolating and symptoms and all that kind of thing will change all the time. So by the time you're watching this video, what was relevant when I was ill is possibly already out of date. So please do check the government regulations for where you live for most up-to-date information. Now we've got all of that out of the way. Let's get into the questions. Actually, very quickly before we get into the questions, just want to say if you are new, welcome, please subscribe, hit the bell to be notified. When I post new videos every Tuesday, Thursday and Sunday at 7 p.m, I do lots of home organisation content. We've got lots of stuff going on about homeschool at the moment because that's what we're having to do. Lots of vlogs, speed cleans, hauls, all that kind of thing. I hope you will enjoy it and I would love to have you as a subscriber. Right, now we will get on with the questions. So first one, what is mild coronavirus? Now, I'm not sure about the medical definition, but for the purpose of this video, I am talking about my experience with it as being mild because I did not require any external medical help or any hospitalization or anything, thank goodness. I was very, very lucky. So I don't know if that's the actual definition. Perhaps someone with a bit more medical training than me can jump in. What's the difference between mild, moderate, severe or whatever. So I knew I felt awful. I was so ill, but I didn't need any medical treatment. So therefore, we're going to class what I went through as mild. Now, lots of you asked, what were your symptoms on a day-by-day basis? So I'm going to try and break that down as best as my COVID fog brain, because I tell you what, one of the symptoms, let me know if you've had this, if you've had coronavirus, was just utter brain fog. It made pregnancy brain fog make me look like some sort of genius because the COVID brain fog was real. It was a real struggle. So fingers crossed this is pretty accurate, but with the brain fog. So I would consider day one, we're going to call it day one. I don't know if it's the day before it really kicked off, but it's the day I first noticed anything at all. I was fine most of the day, but you know when kind of during the winter, everyone has like a weak spot that any bugs and things go to, and mine is my throat. I always kind of feel like my tonsils should have been taken out years ago. So by the end of the day, my throat was feeling scratchy and I just felt not quite right. Not ill, but just not quite right. And I genuinely just thought I was coming down with a cold or something, maybe the beginning of tonsillitis. I mean, equally, we have been staying in. So I actually got coronavirus in December. This was after my children had already been homeschooling for a while because the government shut the schools. So we hadn't been in contact with, well, hardly anybody at all. My husband had been one or two places. I will get into all that. But my initial thoughts on day one were, I don't think this is COVID, but where I picked up anything, where could I have possibly picked up even a cold? It doesn't even make sense. So by the end of day one, I went to bed just thinking, okay, it's probably a cold, it's probably nothing. Zara, my youngest, my currently 3-year-old, was coughing a little bit that day. She was coughing on and off. And I thought, well, if this turns into a persistent cough, then we're going to have to get her tested just because those are the rules, aren't they? So the symptoms at the time of filming this video and at the time I was ill, that the government wants you to get tested if you have. Now, these are not all the symptoms that you can get with coronavirus, but they're the 3 that at the time they wanted us to get tested if we had, were high fever, a persistent cough, and loss of sense of taste or smell. Now, I didn't really have any of these at the time. Zara's cough was, on and off. Then overnight, day 1 into day 2, Zara did cough during the night. So when I got up in the morning, I thought, right, I'm going to have to take her temperature. The other thing that happened when I got up in the morning was I felt so rough. I just felt my throat was really, really sore. I just felt lethargic. I was aching all over. I felt like I was coming down with flu. Now, a lot of people say they've had flu. Flu is not a heavy cold. Flu is like where everything hurts, where even your hair hurts. I felt like I was coming down with that. I thought, oh, no, please no. So anyway, I grabbed the thermometer initially to buzz Zara because she was coughing. So I thought she seemed the most COVID-y of the both of us. She did not have a fever. I then, as it was in my hand, put it in my ear, and I did. I did have a temperature. I was like, oh, great. Okay, so COVID test for myself and for Zara as well. Incidentally, I zapped, buzzed, or do the beeps as we call it. The rest of the family, no one else had any form of fever. So when I went to book the test, really I would have liked to have everyone tested at that stage, but the guidelines at the time were quite specific. It's only people that had symptoms were eligible for a test. So it was only myself and Zara that were eligible in any way for a test. So I booked tests for myself and Zara. I will link a blog post below where I've linked all the details and things in this, and because there's a video you're expected to watch before you go to the drive-through test centre. So all of that is in the blog post, as well as all the links to all the government sites and everything. That's linked below in the description if you want to see any of that. Anyway, watch this video. And we'd been to a testing site before back in September when I got the children tested for COVID then. It turns out they were negative then. So we'd had some experience with testing. For the first test, they actually dropped the windows and tested the children themselves, but that was not what was in the guidelines. So I was assuming that we were going to have to test Zara ourselves and I was going to have to swab myself. I was in fact correct. That is what they say in the guidelines, and that's what we actually had to do. So they say that you need to sit in the back with the child in order to swab them because you're not allowed to get out of the car at the testing centre. So my husband had to come with me in order to drive, which was good actually because I was feeling so rough and really woozy. I don't think I would have been safe to drive anyway. So because obviously we didn't have anyone to leave the other children with, we all went for a nice family outing to the testing centre. I tested Zara. The original tests for the children that we had back in September, a nurse dropped the window with full PPE and swabbed their tonsils and up their noses. Now, this time they said that we only had to do up Zara's nose. She wriggled and cried and I thought, oh, wow, I'm going to be poking her in the brain. I just felt like I was doing it wrong. I felt like I was going to hurt her. She was screaming. It wasn't ideal. I wasn't sure I did it right, but I did my best. And then I had to swab myself. So we're on to day 2 now, but one of the other questions is what is the testing like? So we'll get into what is the testing like because that happened on day 2 and then we'll go back to the symptoms. I had to swab, it's like a long cotton bud. I had to swab my own tonsils. It did make me gag if I'm honest. And then you have to shove it up your nose. Obviously don't do that the wrong way around, people, otherwise it goes up your nose then in your mouth, not cool. So swab my tonsils, up my nose. Still wasn't convinced I was doing it right, but did my best. And then you've got to put, there's like specific instructions. You've got to put the little swab thing into the little tube thing, and then that goes in a bag, and that goes in another bag. It's all instructions on that. But what you have to be very careful to do is to keep the kits separately because each of them is kind of numbered up. So what I would suggest, what we did, and if we hadn't done that it would have been a right mess, is writing the names on each kit and just keeping them totally separately. It would have been very easy to get very flustered in the car and mix all the kits up, and then we wouldn't have known whose test results belonged to who. Did the test, came home, we're still on day 2. Zara, other than coughing and spluttering a bit, was fine. She just was fine in herself. I was still pretty convinced it was not COVID at this time because we just hadn't really seen anyone. I just didn't know where we could have picked it up. So I was pretty convinced that I was just doing this, same as last time, out of kind of due diligence because it was the right thing to do to get it checked, just because that's what we're supposed to do. So I was just feeling awful. I also felt really sick. You know, like when you're pregnant, you have to run to the loo out of nowhere to be sick. It was like that, and just hurting all over, aching, fever. I did not feel good. And the brain fog definitely was setting in on day 2. So I don't know if day 2 was like it was the first day I felt really ill, but day 1, maybe it was like day -1, I don't know, day 0. That was the first day that I felt any twinge of just feeling anything slightly less than perfectly healthy. So day 1, I really didn't have symptoms. I just felt like I might have been coming down with something. It wasn't till day 2 that I would say everything really hit. Day 3, I was much the same as day 2, feverish, achy, headache, brain fog, felt rubbish. So on day 4, my fever had broken, yet somehow I felt worse. So no fever anymore, but I just felt more achy. I had kind of like random stabbing pains, like my arm would throb and then suddenly my shin would be killing me, and just like random stabbing pains, just throbbing all over my body. I just had no energy at all, just felt quite disgusting. Throat still really sore. But interestingly, I didn't really have any form of cough. I was short of breath, and when I climbed the stairs or something, because I was short of breath, it was making me cough, but I didn't really have a cough. Because when I've had a cough before now, you know, you'd wake yourself up coughing, you'd just be coughing constantly. I didn't really have that at any stage. My cough was more triggered by the shortness of breath, if that makes sense. Day 5, much the same as day 4, just feeling horrendous. I had heard that day 5 was the worst, and I probably was, if I'm honest. It didn't sort of escalate massively on day 5. I would say day 4 and day 5 were pretty similar, but I did feel awful, just really throbbing, banging headache I could not get rid of, and just as if I was trudging through mud every time I tried to move. On day 6, I noticed my sense of smell began to diminish. I wouldn't say I lost my sense of smell at any stage. I mean, I've heard reports of people I know saying, yeah, I drank vinegar and I couldn't taste it. I never got there. I just found that certain smells I couldn't smell properly, and other things I could, and some things had just diminished a bit. It was a little bit odd. Now, on the evening of day 7, I would say I experienced the most alarming symptom I've ever had, and the most sudden onset. It almost sent me into a panic. It was very, very strange. It was all of a sudden, it was the evening, and it was as if, the best way I can describe it, as if suddenly I bleached the inside of my nose. Like, the inside of my nose had been burnt with chemicals all inside my nose and up through my air passages. It was so strange. And it came on so quickly, I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I almost panicked. I'm not sort of prone to panic attacks or anything, but it really did make me feel panicky. I was like, oh, I need fresh air, I need fresh air. So I had to go and stand by a freezing cold window, have it open, and just to feel like there was air going in. It was like I couldn't feel the air going into my nose. Does that even make sense? It was so odd and really unpleasant. What I did, I don't know if that's what you're supposed to do, I put Vicks on my chest. I felt that would open my airways. I don't know if that worked or if it was a total placebo, but it was so odd, so unpleasant, and very, very sudden. I suppose the closest thing is if suddenly water had washed up your nose, like if you'd done a tumble toss in the swimming pool, a bit like that, but nothing had happened. It was horrible. But what a weird symptom. And the one sort of symptom I would say that I experienced through COVID is it's almost like one illness would finish and another one would start. So it wasn't like you get gradually more ill and then the symptoms diminish and then you get better. It was like, right, this is finished, on to this, and now this, and it's just really, really strange. On day 8, I was finally feeling a little bit better. Not just different symptoms, but finally making improvement. I felt far from well, but day 8 is probably the first day I felt like I saw any real improvement. By day 9, I really felt like I was in recovery, totally drained, could not shake the headache. The headaches really did drag on, but at least I felt like I was on the mend. So days 10 to 14, I was definitely recovering. It was just the shortness of breath, which really, really did take its toll for quite a long time, and the really bad headaches and the fatigue that were left. But the kind of, obviously the fever is long gone, the aches and pains just randomly all over my body luckily had gone. So day 15 and beyond, I did feel a lot more human, probably like I'm feeling now. The hardest thing I've found about recovering from this is I keep thinking I'm okay, and then I kind of overexert myself and I'm short of breath again. It's not taking a great deal to wipe me out totally. I am not feeling anywhere near as energetic as I should. And that is kind of still lingering a few weeks on. So the next question you guys have sent in is, how long did it take to get the results? Now, we've had a total of 3 testing experiences. I will get to the third one in a second for COVID. And all of the test results came back within 48 hours. I booked them on the website, but you can actually book them through the app as well, I believe, although I haven't actually done that myself. I booked them through the website. I managed to get tests the same day as when I booked them each time, I believe. They were all in different places though. Every time I booked them, it's given me different location options depending on availability. And then the test results all came back within 48 hours and you get a text and an email as long as you put those details in. How did I feel about the COVID test results? Truth was, I was pretty shocked because I really wasn't expecting it to come back as COVID. Just the fact that, I mean, if you guys have been following me on Instagram, you've been here on my channel for a while, we've been so careful as a family. I will get to that in a second because I've got another question about how I think I caught it. I think I was getting the test just because I felt that it was the right thing to do, not because I believed that we had COVID. We'd really been so careful that I was pretty convinced there's no way we could have picked it up. Turns out I was wrong. Were you scared when you had coronavirus? Yes, I'm going to be honest and say I was. I mean, I have been very anxious about the whole thing since this whole pandemic kicked off. My family and I are very much in a low risk category, so I had no rational reason to be massively over anxious about it. I think the anxiety stems back to when I had Zara. Now, if you have watched my birth stories video, you will know that we had a bit of a traumatic time after we had Zara. Now you can go and watch the full story over there. But in short, I was rushed back into hospital with sepsis. So I was back in there. I had Zara with me. She was only a few days old. The little ones couldn't come to see me because they'd come down with chicken pox. I felt so guilty. Insane really to be guilty for being that ill to be hospitalised, but guilty from being away from my other children. And then when Zara was 3 weeks old, she caught the chicken pox and they admitted her to hospital. So I was like disappeared in the middle of the night again. So I had this whole period of a good few weeks, the first few weeks of Zara's life, feeling really guilty for neglecting my other children and being kind of ripped away from them and taken into hospital. And I think it's probably caused some underlying trauma that I haven't really dealt with. So the whole pandemic, I was terrified that one of us was going to end up in hospital. Just terrified. A disproportionate amount of terrified, really. Yes, when I got ill, I was scared. I thought, well, this is it now. We've been so careful and now I'm ill and it's going to go one way or another. I'd convinced myself in my head, I don't know if this was right or wrong, that day 5 was this magic day, and if I could get past day 5, I was kind of out of the woods. So I don't know how true that was. I mean, as it happens, I am fine. I still have a few kind of after effects, shall we say, of it, but I'm so grateful that my whole family have got through the whole episode and nobody needed medical attention. So I'm so grateful for that. But yes, if I'm honest, I was scared when I had it that it was going to turn out a lot worse than it did. Did you ever feel like you needed to go to hospital when you had coronavirus? Now, other than the bleach nose incident, which I didn't actually think I needed to go to hospital, but I will admit I was pretty close to having a panic attack, I did think that I felt really rough. I worried that I might get worse and need to go to hospital, but there was no moment where I thought I need to phone an ambulance now. It never got so bad that I was not able to cope. But yeah, the bleach nose thing did make me panic. I had to really talk to myself and really have a word with myself and say, look, you are breathing. You might not be able to feel the air going into your nose, but you are breathing. And to really kind of calm myself down. How is your sense of smell and taste? Now, I would say that my sense of smell and taste fluctuated a little bit while I was ill, but it never disappeared altogether. Did you have a cough with COVID-19? Really, my only cough has been as a result of shortness of breath. I have not just been sitting there and randomly had a coughing fit when I wasn't even talking. I've not woken myself up coughing. I have coughed, but more as a result of things. Does that make any sense? Here's a good one. How did you get coronavirus? The truth is, I have no idea. I was honestly so careful, guys. I mean, we've been careful the whole time since March. We did have a period where we did a little more venturing out over the summer, and we went to a handful of places, and then my children started back to school in September. I was adamant, right, no extracurricular activities, just school. Let's keep the risk to a minimum, and if things have improved by October, you can kind of go back to things. Obviously, things by October were like, not good, and Wales went back into lockdown. But since that lockdown in October, I have been to the school wearing a mask outside. I did take Zara for her immunisation. I think that was since October, but that was, maybe in October. That was quite a long time ago. But other than that, I've not even been to the local shop. I've had everything delivered. We have been so careful. So I have no idea how I managed to get it. It would have made sense if Zara had it and then she had given it to me, but I have no idea how I got it. Next question. Do you think your husband could have been asymptomatic and got it at work? In a word, yes. He hadn't been anywhere unnecessary, but he had been places for work. So he'd been a lot more places than me. He'd been very, very careful. He is very careful with things like gloves, and he always does that thing, I can't remember what it's called, where nurses do it. Chime in below if someone knows what this is called, where you have a clean hand and a dirty hand, and you do things with a clean hand, you do things with a dirty hand. Does anyone know what that's called? It's for treating wounds and things. Anyway, he does that. Even when he goes to the petrol station or anything, he uses that system. So he's really, really careful. He had not been many places, but he had been to some workplaces, and he'd had to go and pick things up in some shops and things for work. After I had developed symptoms, but before I had my test results, his phone went off, the NHS app, to say that he'd been in contact with someone with coronavirus and had to isolate for 3 days. Obviously, this wasn't me because I hadn't had my test results yet, so the app didn't know that I had coronavirus. And if he only had to isolate for 3 days, it means, I believe, that he must have been in contact with someone, this is my detective work, 7 days prior to that to only have 3 days remaining to isolate. So therefore, there'd been a whole 7 days where he'd been walking around oblivious to potentially being full of COVID. It is quite likely that he caught it from that person, the person that caused his app to activate, whoever that was, and that he had given it to me. That makes a lot more sense than me being the first person to have it when I hadn't been anywhere. Because not only had I only been to the school since October, but for the week before I had COVID, I hadn't even been to the school because the school was closed. So, did anyone else in your household get coronavirus after you tested positive? Right. In a word, yes. Were they ill? No. So, several days after I was tested, my teenage son came to me and said, Mum, I feel a bit achy. I thought, oh, here we go. Mum, I feel a bit achy. I took his temperature. It was a little raised. So I gave him 2 paracetamol, and no word of a lie, that was it. 2 paracetamol, and it was gone. So his symptoms lasted less than an hour. Now, I still thought it was prudent to get him tested, so I booked him a test. While I was booking these tests, I said, right, has anyone else got any symptoms? So obviously no one else is ill. Can everyone else smell things properly? So my husband's like, oh, I don't think I can smell. He was smelling his aftershave. I don't think I can smell this. So, well, can you smell it or not? I was like, well, I don't think I can smell it as much as I should. Okay. So we should probably get you tested. He's like, well, I don't know, because I always get a bit chesty. He always gets like weird sinusy things this time of year, and his sense of smell always kind of diminishes a bit when he has that. So he's like, oh, I don't know if it's that, if it's like normal for me at this time of year or not. I said, look, we'll just get you tested because it might be a symptom and we need to check. And then I smell tested the little ones, like, can you smell this? To Bella, and she's like, oh, I don't know. Can you smell this, William? Yes. Zara was still coughing. She was the most COVID-y obvious of all of us, because obviously I was really, really achy and feeling really rough. But if anyone had seen me, I wouldn't have looked like I had COVID, if that makes sense. Whereas if I'd taken Zara out in public, not that we were allowed to because we were isolating, but if Zara had been out in public, she would have been coughing and everyone would have been like, ooh. So she was coughing a lot. So I was pretty convinced her first test was a false negative. I was convinced I'd done it wrong. So I booked tests for my teenager, who had actual symptoms, for an hour, my husband, who couldn't smell his aftershave right, Bella, who wasn't sure she could smell something, and Zara, who had a persistent cough. So we managed to book the test for that day, went and did them. Oh, the joys again. This time we had 4 tests. remember to keep them separate, people. Tested everyone. The girls just up their noses again. Husband and teenager, tonsils and noses. Yes, they both gagged too. So then when their results came back, I was really, really surprised. I was convinced that Zara, although she wasn't especially ill, had mild COVID. Her results came back negative again, even though she had the most classic symptoms. And Zara had even had a fever. She wasn't especially unwell, but she'd even had a fever just before I took her to get the test. Not COVID. Bella came back negative. So none of the little ones, I mean, William was never tested because he didn't have any symptoms at all, but none of the 3 little ones had COVID as far as I'm concerned. My husband tested positive, and so did my teenager. So neither of them were ill in any way. I mean, other than that 1 hour where my teenager felt a little bit run down, but they just weren't ill at all. So I was really, really poorly. My husband, who is quite a bit older than me and male, therefore much higher risk, not ill. And I was really, really poorly. So anyone could guess as to why that was. I mean, if I'm honest, I'm glad that it was that way around, because if any of them had been really poorly and I hadn't, you know what I would have been saying? I would have been saying, darling, if I could take this off you, I would. And that's what I would have been trying to do. So this is the way around. I would have preferred it anyway, but I had it, others didn't. It's a funny old disease. What was your experience with Track and Trace? Right, okay, so the Track and Trace app, we have all of that running on our phones. So the idea is, I don't know the exact details, but I'll put a link below so you can kind of look into the most up-to-date information in that. But basically it works on proximity of phones. And if your phone has been near someone else's phone within the last specified amount of time, that their phone is notified that they have coronavirus. So when you get a positive test result, they give you a little code and you're supposed to put that in the app, and then your app notifies anyone else you've been near. But when we all had our positive results, I put that information into the app. Obviously my husband had that you have to isolate for 3 days message before I even had my results. So then I put my results into my app, and then later that day, I think I had my results in the afternoon. That evening, my son's phone went off. So he was notified he had to isolate for the 10 days. My husband's phone, in spite of the fact it's obviously within a reasonable proximity of mine, never updated for my results. So in fact, his even counted down the 3 days and it said he was allowed to go out, which obviously he did not, because he was not actually allowed to go out. But it was a little bit worrying that that app didn't kind of notify his phone. It would have been good and quite reassuring if it had. So I don't know, let me know in the comments what's been your experience with the app. Have you been notified of anything when a member of your household or someone you've been in contact with has actually tested positive? Has it notified your phone? What's been your experience? I just would be really interested to hear. So the other element of Track and Trace, which I didn't realise was totally separate from the app, is the people that phone you. And apparently these people work in each local authority. So they ring you up, they ask you who you've been in contact. I believe, off the top of my head, although utter COVID brain fog, I think it was 48 hours before I was ill. They asked me if I'd been anywhere or seen anyone, and obviously I'd not actually been anywhere, so that wasn't exactly a long list. How did you manage with 3 young children? Did you manage to isolate from them? The government guidance is to isolate from other members of your household wherever possible. Unfortunately, this just was not possible for our family. I mean, even the woman on Track and Trace on the phone said, I have to read this guidance to you now, but I've got to say that it's probably not going to be possible with 3 young children, but if possible, you need to isolate from the rest of your family. So the advice is to do it where possible. Sadly, it wasn't possible for us. What did you do to ease your coronavirus symptoms at home? There's a fair amount I found online about, are these coronavirus symptoms, what you should do in order to get a test, all that kind of stuff. But I didn't find a whole lot of information other than take paracetamol and ibuprofen about how to really ease your symptoms at home or anything like that. I had lots of people messaging me on Instagram and things and giving me suggestions, things that they had been through, or people that were nurses and doctors and things messaging me. So I tried a few things that I heard from them. Obviously, I had paracetamol and ibuprofen for the pain, the headache, and to work on my fever. I did use Vicks Vapor Rub, which I put on my chest and my back after that whole bleach nose incident to try and open up my airways. No idea if it really helped or if I just felt I was doing something. I did feel like I needed to feel I was doing something, and that in itself made me feel better. And if it works as a bit of a placebo, I don't know. I mean, I didn't actually have a cough, but there is a trick you can try. Obviously, seek medical attention and things first. But when previously, you know, the days before we knew about COVID, we'd been to the doctors and we'd just been told to look after ourselves or our children at home, I would put vapor rub on the soles of their feet. This is weird. It's so odd. It's like witchcraft. I don't know how it works, but it does. Put vapor rub on the soles of their feet and then put socks, tight-fitting socks, over the feet. That helps to ease coughing just enough so you can go to sleep. I learned about this trick just before I was pregnant with Zara, and I had a cough when I was pregnant with Bella, and it broke me. It just absolutely broke me, and there was nothing I could make it stop. I had a cough when I was pregnant with Zara, did this, it worked a treat. So if you are suffering, or your members of family are suffering from a cough, and you have been told by your GP or whatever to just kind of go home and deal with it, try that, it might ease the symptoms. A lot of people had suggested that I sleep propped up. I don't know if that was a real thing or not. And a lot of people also suggested not sleeping on my back. Now, as it happens, having been pregnant for what feels like a million years when you add up all of my children, I'm in the habit of sleeping on my side anyway, so that wasn't a big deal for me. I did prop another pillow under myself. I don't know if it helped or not, but I think it just helped kind of with my anxiety to feel like I was doing something. It didn't really harm, it wasn't the most comfortable, but I felt like I was doing something, and that in itself helped. If you get ill again, would you get tested again? Now, I was told by the lady who phoned from Track and Trace that we would test positive for 90 days, chances are, give or take, after our positive test results. So she said that if an employer or someone was to need us to get a test in order to go back to work, we shouldn't take that test. We should show them the positive test result from that day and know that we probably would still test positive even now, even though we don't really have it and we're not really contagious. So I don't know, has anyone told you guys that? That's what we were told on the phone from Track and Trace. You can test positive for up to 90 days afterwards. Did you have to isolate from the day of your symptoms or the day of the tests? Technically, you have to isolate from the day of your symptoms starting. Obviously, with my husband and my son, we weren't exactly sure when that was. So we went from the day of the test, and my symptoms only started the day before, and I didn't feel really properly ill, like really, really ill to the day of the test. So we went from the day of the test just to be safe. When were you and your family allowed out? So the rules at the time when we got ill were either the test day or the day the symptoms started day, whichever day that you happen to go with. It's 10 days after that. So if you get symptoms and get tested today, it's 10 days starting tomorrow, from what I could gather from Track and Trace when they called us. Now, it complicated matters because my husband and my son tested positive after I got ill. Now, it is my personal belief my husband had it first. But still, we had to go from their test dates, not from the dates in which they actually may have got ill, which might have been when I got ill, it might have been earlier. So we had to go from their test date. Technically, according to Track and Trace, and what it shows in this graphic that I shall put on the screen right now, then basically I would have had to isolate for still 10 days. Then I would have been allowed out before my husband and teenager, and they would have had to isolate for the 10 days after their tests. And also the little ones only would have had to serve the same 10 days that I had to do, and then would have been allowed out before my husband and teenager. Now, I'd heard lots of conflicting reports about that. The graphic I just showed you is from the BBC. I'd been told this information from Track and Trace. I didn't want to go out into the world, potentially spread it, be doing anything wrong. It just didn't feel like the right thing to do. So what we did was we all isolated until all of us were out of isolation. I just felt that was a safer option. I mean, it's not like we could have gone far anyway, because Wales is and was and still is in lockdown. Do you feel any relief now that you've had and survived coronavirus? Yes and no. Now, I'm really grateful that I have managed to recover from it. I'm delighted none of us ended up in hospital, which has been my big fear all of last year. It is my massive hope that if we were unfortunate enough to have it again, we would be as lucky with our recovery and with the fact that most of them had almost no symptoms again. But will having had it make me drop my guard? Absolutely not. I mean, we do not know enough about the virus, especially about the new variant. We don't know if we can have it again. We don't know if it will be worse the second time. We don't know about spreading it. Even if I'm immune, I can probably still spread it on my hands. I don't want to spread it to vulnerable people. So no, we will not be dropping our guard. We will not be dashing out to do loads of things. I mean, like I said, Wales is in lockdown, so there's not much we can do anyway, but I'm not going to suddenly be going to loads of shops and things. I'm still very much going to be keeping ourselves to ourselves and really trying to follow the guidance, keep our distance, wear our masks, keep up with hand washing. I do not feel like we are safe just because I've had it. Do you regret being so careful all year just to end up getting it? I mean, no, I don't. I absolutely not. I really feel like being extra careful and super, super careful has been the right thing to do. And I'm really glad that we did that, because even though I did end up getting it, goodness knows how I ended up getting it being so careful, but even though I did end up getting it, we have helped to slow the spread by not being out there in the world. And if we had been out there in the world, maybe we would have spread it on to some more vulnerable people. Was it worse than flu? Now, have you ever had real flu? Not like a heavy cold that people say a flu, because so many people say they've got the flu and they have a heavy cold. Real flu is horrific. So yes, it was like real flu, like every bit of you hurting, like your hair follicles hurting kind of flu, where you just don't want to do anything and you can barely move. The thing that scares me is I've only had flu a handful of times in my life. And all of those other times I was out in the world touching things and seeing people and hugging people and going all the places and not even thinking about it. And then I picked up flu a handful of times, and I'm in my late 30s. Coronavirus managed to get its grips on me when I was living like a hermit and obsessively hand washing. So that is got to be the massive difference between the two. They're both really no fun at all, but how contagious it is. Sorry, and I don't know if I had the new variant or the old variant. Maybe I had the super contagious kind, maybe I had the old kind, I don't know. Was it the new model? Did I have the upgraded version? I guess I'll never know. Either way, I just know it must be so contagious for me to have got it when I was being so careful. Have the COVID symptoms lingered, and how exhausted are you now? Well, at the time of filming this, it's a few weeks post positive test result. I am feeling, as you can probably tell, a lot better. My throat is still a little scratchy. I am still getting intermittent headaches. More than anything, I'm a lot more worn out a lot more quickly than I should be. I am one of the lowest risk categories, other than children, I guess. I am female. I have a normal BMI. I'm reasonably fit and healthy. I normally walk about 12,000 steps a day just doing the school run, even if I don't do any formal exercise. I am in a really low risk group, but I still managed to get it, and I just don't feel as healthy as I did before. I feel like even just climbing the stairs, I'm like, oof, that's a lot. Obviously at the moment, the children are not in school because we're in lockdown. Again, is it the third time? Can't even keep track. So I'm not doing my normal 12,000 steps a day, and maybe that's a blessing because it might just floor me. I'm not sure I could manage it at the moment, if I'm honest. So we're actually about to go for a walk now, just a little really gentle round the block, but I know I'm going to feel pretty tired after that. And I'll probably have a little bit of a cough halfway around from being a little short of breath, but I am grateful that I'm feeling better. So I would say there are some lingering symptoms. It is not gone from my body. All the effects have not disappeared yet, but I have high hopes that they will. I'm one of the very, very lucky ones. COVID was horrible, but I was lucky enough not to need medical attention. If you have been impacted by this horrible, horrible virus and, you know, really suffered from it or lost anyone from it, my heart absolutely goes out to you. I want to say a massive thank you to all the key workers, all the NHS staff for kind of getting us through all this craziness. I want to send out massive hugs to everyone stuck in lockdown, everyone struggling. It is a hideous, awful, scary time, but I know that there will be a time, hard to imagine as it is, where all this is behind us and we can say, we did it, we got through it. So please guys, stay safe, wear your masks, do not go anywhere you don't have to go, wash your hands, stay back from people. Do not think, oh, it'll be okay, I'll just risk it. It is not worth it. Trust me, it's not worth it. I felt so ill. So just, I don't mean to worry you. I just want you to be extra careful and alert, and make sure you're kind of following all the guidance to stay safe and protect yourselves and your family. So thank you so much for watching and listening to me rabbit on about this. I hope it's been helpful. Please remember, I'm not a doctor, and to take any advice from the links below or your own GP, government websites, if you need any more information. If you have liked this video, please give it a massive thumbs up. Do not forget to subscribe. Hit the bell to be notified when I post new videos every Tuesday, Thursday and Sunday at 7 p.m. Latest video across here. Another video you may enjoy from my channel down here. See you guys soon. Bye. Stay safe.